All right, everybody. Well, I told you at the last one that I was not going to see you again till early next week, and the weather can't let me stay away. Not giving me a break or anyone else a break. I said there's unless something crazy happened, you wouldn't see me until early next week. But as it turns out, something fairly crazy is going on at the moment down in Southern California. So I'm just going to skip right to it. There's been a line, I mentioned this during the conversation earlier, of strong to severe thunderstorms moving across the Central Coast from earlier this afternoon, now approaching Los Angeles County from the west. Uh, I thought I'd be able to get away with just saying about that much and leaving it at that, but in the meantime, this line appears to have generated a couple of actual tornadoes that have moved onshore and caused damage at different parts of the Central Coast. Nothing extreme, but still, it's unusual to see that a line hold together like this for so long. This has actually been a pretty coherent feature moving across the landscape for the past 5 or 6 hours from the far northern central coast, even up into the certain parts of the Bay Area. But it's actually strengthened as it's moved into Southern California. And of course, the problem with this is Southern California is already really wet. And so now there's this line of torrential downpours moving in to parts of Southern California, along with the risk of very strong wind gusts. Some places have recorded wind gusts, again, of 60 to 70 miles an hour, with some wind damage in Isla Vista in Santa Barbara. And now, I think I'm just going to start sharing my screen since this is definitely a radar evening. And now, the Weather Service has actually issued a dual severe thunderstorm and flash flood warning for most of Ventura and parts of Los Angeles County, including parts of LA City proper. So the west side of LA, the San Fernando Valley, now under both a severe thunderstorm warning and a flash flood warning. I can't say that I've seen that before, and there have been a couple of tornado warnings issued for this line by the Weather Service in LA, and at least one, possibly two, as yet unconfirmed tornadoes, but it sure seems like there were because people say they saw a tornado and there is tornado like damage. Wind damage in some of these places where trees came down, and even some minor structural damage. So it seems like this line means business. So let's zoom in. I'm going to bring it to one panel first and just zoom in on the actual radar reflectivity. Again, this is not going to be a prolonged storm like the atmospheric river, but it's a short but very sharp shock. And this line is now moving through Thousand Oaks as we speak, and about to go through Simi Valley. So eventually, in the next few minutes, you're going to see this in Malibu and Topanga Canyon. And this is starting to get into the west side of the San Fernando Valley up in here, I guess, and especially the south side of this. So the west side of the San Fernando Valley first, and then the south side probably will be hit hardest. But honestly, given the way the system is held together, this strong line of showers and thunderstorms. There's not a huge amount of lightning, so I'm calling them thunderstorms. There's probably at least occasional lightning, but for all intents and purposes, they're behaving as thunderstorms, which is severe thunderstorms, which is why the Weather Service issued that warning. As this line moves eastward, I don't really see any reason why it's not going to hold together as it goes towards LA, even towards downtown LA. So most folks in the city of LA are about to get hit pretty hard by this line, which may contain, probably will contain at least a brief torrential downpour, maybe some lightning, maybe some small hail, possibly some damaging wind gusts, 60, 70 miles an hour, and maybe even an isolated tornado, since it seems like there have been some in recent hours with this band. Again, there was wind damage reported in Isla Vista back to the west when this line moved through Santa Barbara. Wind damage reported again, I believe it was the Ventura coast, somewhere along there. And then back up along the central coast is where the actual likely tornado occurred. All of this and more is possible as this moves into LA and moves eastward and southward. This is going to probably make it through most of Southern California in the next couple of hours. So again, once this is over, things really are going to calm down. But if you haven't gone through this yet, it's going to be a pretty rough ride. And again, the Weather Service has reissued. This is going to outline the general region. This is the flash flood warning from the Weather Service, and then this is the severe thunderstorm warning from the Weather Service. So again, largely overlapping, but both of these things are concerns, because this is the kind of rainfall rate that on supersaturated soils could cause problems, particularly again in the Santa Monica Mountains. So thinking sort of about this region here, which is right where this line is about to go through. Of course, urban flooding possible up in San Fernando Valley, and then assuming this line holds together as it goes into central LA, East LA, urban small stream flooding in this region too, assuming it holds together. So let's bring up the storm relative wind velocity, as well as the radar. Pull them both up, see if there's any spinny things going on. Well, one thing you can see is you can see the gust front associated with this that's moving through. So that's sort of where the winds are. So if you are west of this point, so this is sort of the line where there's a sudden, perhaps very strong or damaging gust of wind. This is probably why the Weather Service issued that severe thunderstorm warning for 60 to 70 mile an hour wind gusts. This is probably where that gust is going to occur, and this is all moving eastward. So all of this, and you can kind of see that this band is not a straight line. It's convex and concave. It's near the inflection points are where there could be a brief tornadic spin up. So say right around here, there might be a water spout in there right now. I'm not seeing any obvious inflection points over land right now, but somewhere in this vicinity is where there could be a water spout, could become a tornado as it moves on shore briefly. This is what happened earlier up the coast. So quite an active evening, and I don't think I can remember there being, for this large a portion of Los Angeles County, I'm not saying there never has been, but I don't personally recall there having been a coincident overlapping severe thunderstorm and flash flood warning over such a large part of the actual city of LA. This happens occasionally during summer monsoonal thunderstorms across the mountain and desert regions when you get a really strong one, but this is pretty unusual for a winter storm, LA proper. And it's also unusual that this line is held together. One of the reasons I didn't do this live stream later in the evening, at least initially, was that I thought that this line might not hold together this well, but it has managed to do so. So it's looking pretty spicy. All right, so let's see if there's any reports of anything. At this point, we're probably starting to see reports from the area as to what's going on. I'm just trawling the web just to see really quickly while I'm here. The Weather Service, by the way, they just announced that they think that it probably was a tornado, in fact, in Pismo Beach earlier today. This was a statement they just issued. Let's see. There were multiple reports of wind damage, downed trees, power lines, power poles, and some structural damage in Grover Beach and Pismo Beach areas. The Weather Service is going to do a formal damage survey tomorrow to determine whether it was from a tornado or severe straight-line winds. So it's never officially a tornado until the Weather Service says it is, but it looks quite plausible. That's quite reasonable to assume that that's what it was, and there could be a couple of more of these overnight. That remains a distinct possibility given this feature, and this is potentially true just about anywhere in Southern California, east of where this currently is. I think once this line moves through, that's probably going to be it for the evening, but again, this is a pretty intense line. And if you haven't, well, let's just say this, if if you're unsure of whether this line has moved through yet, it probably hasn't, because it's going to be pretty obvious when it does. So well, let's see. I'm gonna leave the storm relative velocity product up here, because that kind of tells us where the big wind gusts and whether there's any spin ups. Earlier, as I was showing actually on the previous live stream, and that may have even been right around when the probable tornado occurred, there were some pretty obvious couplets on the velocity signature. I don't see any that are super obvious right this very second, which means that there may not necessarily be any tornadoes or waterspouts ongoing right now. But again, this line is kind of discontinuous, and so it's in the kinks in the line. So say in this region where it sort of bends back on itself, or something could potentially pop up. And again, all of this is moving east, probably going to hit somewhere between Marina Del Rey and Manhattan Beach. So again, there's no confirmed tornado or waterspout, but that is where I would expect one might develop in a situation like this. And it looks like right now, unfortunately, some very heavy rain, probably even torrential rain, just about to move through Topanga Canyon. So that's a real heavy, this could produce a debris flow or mudslides in Topanga Canyon or in the other canyons above Malibu, in that part of the western Santa Monica Mountains region. So, it's very obvious why the Weather Service has issued, well, actually there's 3 warnings visible on this map. The green one is the flash flood warning, which makes sense. The yellow is the severe thunderstorm warning for the gusty winds and the slight possibility of a tornado. And then the orange one is the special marine warning, which is for strong gusty winds over the water and the potential for a waterspout, which of course is a tornado over water. And it sometimes is a little bit easier for these tornadoes, these weak tornadoes, to form over water, where there's a little bit less surface friction. But again, those waterspouts that form can sometimes move inland as tornadoes, and that's probably what happened earlier today at Pismo Beach. A couple of folks claiming that they can't hear me, but then other people saying that they can, so I'm guessing that it's probably not an audio issue on my end if some people can hear me. So let me know if for some reason there's an issue, but I think for once that might be okay on my end. So as I say, the most interesting areas to me right now on this, and there are multiple, but right now, is this very intense line of torrential rain now bowing out across Santa Monica Mountains, and then also this kink in the convective line, this discontinuity where there might be the potential for a waterspout to spin up. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that this actually extends well offshore to the south. This is all the way back here past the islands. So again, as this sweeps eastward, it's gonna swing through most of Southern California over the next few hours. And if we go, I'm gonna do a quick tour, just the geographic tour, go around. We go up to Vandenberg, and there are still, again, this never ends, some bands of scattered showers, heavier showers, but they are not nearly as intense. There might be some small hail, some brief heavy downpours, but nothing like what's going through LA County right now. And we go up to the Bay Area, and kind of the same story. The showers are further and fewer between. Somebody recently told me that there was a huge downpour in downtown San Francisco. Look how far I have to zoom in for this. Look how localized. There's like an intense shower that developed over the Bay Bridge. Like, this is literally between Treasure Island and the Embarcadero. That's how isolated it is. But I guess if you're right on the waterfront, or you're on Yerba Buena Island, or you're on the San Francisco Bay Bridge, you're probably experiencing a downpour. But if you're almost anywhere else in the Bay Area right now, it is mostly dry at this point with some showers to the south. So things are calming down up north. But where they are not calming down yet is down once again in LA. And let's look what happens if we go to the Santa Ana Mountains radar. This isn't the best view, although it actually shows that some of this heavy rain is a little bit more widespread. There's already some decent rain up all the way from really from Glendale to San Bernardino along that corridor, and then up into the San Gabriel Mountains above, presumably. Again, this is an artificial gap in the radar beam because of the mountains being blocking it. So it doesn't look as intense to the west since this radar site's far away, but what it does show is that this is sort of filling into the east. I'll go back to the LA radar because that's clearly the one of most interest right now. So again, whoever's underneath this and just above Malibu and about to go into Topanga Canyon, this is going to be a very short, sharp burst of extremely intense rainfall. That can be a trigger for debris flows, so I would not be surprised to see reports of that coming out of here in the near future, in particular, and then potentially a little bit further east as this line progresses. I'll bring back the dual reflectivity and storm relative velocity view because I want to see if there's any new rotational couplets. So you can kind of see, watch what happens here as these two sort of pieces start to converge. So you see how this line is kind of going like that and this line's kind of going like that. In this vicinity, there's going to be some convergence, and that can be sometimes where you see spin-ups. Now granted, this is out over the open water, and this would be a water spout that might miss land. So this, but then the same thing though, if you notice, something similar is happening right here, again, where there's another piece of sort of a convergence where these lines, there's a bit of horizontal wind shear. And if this spins something up, that I actually end up heading toward the west side of LA. Again, this is just, informed speculation. But we have seen probable tornadoes. We've seen some damage from it tonight, so I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they could spin up again, especially when this line is sort of discontinuous and bowing out a bit. So Malibu is in the thick of things now, it appears. Thanks for joining me on such short notice, by the way. I know this. I said I was done, and it turns out one more. I got one more in me, and this is an interesting one. Sometimes it's kind of fun just to be able to keep it on the radar screen, actually. I don't have to think as much about looking at the camera, but this is definitely one of the more interesting radar screens I've seen in a while in California. There's been plenty of them in recent days, but this one in particular is, it's one thing too, because this really is about to go through a pretty populated area, so a lot of people are going to notice this. This is something that as it goes through LA and through all the populated metro areas to the south and east, that it's going to affect a lot of people. It's not going to be some, devastating storm for most folks, but it's something that everyone's going to notice. It's going to be a hard rain, maybe some good wind, and we'll see if anything spins up along the coast. And we'll see how the flash flood conditions look. I'll check that right now, actually, see if there's been any specific information. Coming in, just keeping the radar up to see what's going on. Yeah, seeing some additional imagery of the probable tornado, as it's being called, in Grover Beach, and that's pretty significant wind damage. And it's isolated enough that the meteorologist in me says it's probable tornado sounds good. It was probably a tornado, and my guess is, based on the damage that's there, maybe a It's hard to tell from the pictures, but maybe, as high as an EF1, so possibly an EF0 at the low end of the scale, but maybe one notch higher, because there are trees that are snapped and uprooted from the base and some structural damage, it looks like. Again, that's in Grover Beach from earlier today. All right, so there was just a report of a severe thunderstorm-related wind gust of 75 miles an hour from an automated weather station near, this was at 9 p.m. This can't be right because that's in the future, but I'm guessing it was probably at 8. No, that doesn't make sense either. I don't know, the timestamp is off. But Agua Dulce, so that's 75 miles an hour gusts. So just an indication that this isn't speculative. There are actually some strong winds associated with this. All right, so back to the radar. You've been seeing the radar the whole time, but I'm taking a look at it again myself, just to see what's going on, what's changing. So it's still, this is still this big blob. The northern segment of this maybe has either weakened slightly, or it's actually hard to tell because it could also just be that the radar beam is getting attenuated because there's now so much precipitation that it's having to go through to get to the signal. The southern part over water still looks quite strong, and that's the part that would be less attenuated by rain, so a little bit hard to say. Zooming into around Malibu. So Malibu is now right sort of at the epicenter of things, as is, again, the west side of the San Fernando Valley, as this continues to move eastward, looking for signs of little rotational couplets. Still not seeing anything too dramatic, but still keeping an eye on this area of bent back line occlusion for something interesting to potentially pop out of it. Yeah, it's quite the evening yet again. So I'll keep the radar up, but I'll take a glance at the questions. This may or may not be a very long live session, but we'll sort of see how this evolves over the next few minutes. I'll ask some questions, answer some questions. Perhaps I'll have one where I ask questions. That might be fun too. Lauren remarks that it came through Santa Barbara foothills with some torrential rain, but no wind or hail in Sycamore Canyon area, which is interesting. The bottom line seems to be torrential rain. Thanks for the shout out about the write-up in Stanford Magazine. That was fun because the author actually came to my home and shadowed me for a couple days for the day in the life of Daniel Swain. I haven't done that one before. But Tracy, it was really nice to meet her, and I think she did a great job. It's a bit of a candid view of what my day-to-day reality is like, but I think it's worth that message getting out there. Let's see. Some folks are marking that the high-resolution refresh model, the HER, is actually showing that this line may strengthen as it goes through LA County. It's possible. I mean, there's enough instability and enough shear out there, anything's possible, and it's done some pretty wild things so far today, although there may or may not be, that sometimes the HER overdoes things a little bit, but then again, maybe not, since this is such an impressive feature to begin with. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if it held together and maintained its intensity all the way through San Diego later tonight. So you got some hours before it gets to San Diego, but this might wake you up. either from the thunder or the gusty wind or the torrential downpours. So again, this is going to result in at least isolated flooding, and maybe a little bit more than isolated flooding in some places where it's a little bit more persistent, like the area where the Weather Service has just reissued once again that flash flood warning across the hillier parts of LA and Ventura counties. Joshua remarks that the wind is howling in Woodland Hills. That is from these severe thunderstorms, so that is fairly dramatic. The original Clark sisters asks, will the North Coastal San Diego see wind, rain, and thunderstorms? At least rain and very possibly wind and thunderstorms later. That is definitely possible. Another comment that up in Mendocino, there's down power lines all over the place, and some tree trunks snapped off 10 or more feet up the trunk, which is not surprising given that as I reported earlier this evening, that the primary remaining power outages, a significant portion of Mendocino County is still without power. And when you see trees that are snapped off 10 feet from the base, that is usually suggestive of pretty violent wind gusts. It's bad enough when trees get uprooted, but sometimes you can get sufficiently violent wind gusts and the tree actually snaps, and that's usually an indication that either the gusts were very sudden or very strong. So that is definitely a testament to the strength of the storm as it moved through the bomb cyclone portion of this storm over the weekend. Update from Latuna Canyon, north of Burbank. It's windy and periods of rain blasts. Sounds about right based on the radar. Clear and cold in Noe Valley, despite the downpour on the Embarcadero, it seems like. Jeff remarks, the rain is pretty strong up by Universal Studios, up against the Santa Monica Mountains. Main part hasn't even gotten there yet, so it's likely to get worse. It's definitely arrived here in Woodland Hills, remarks Joshua. No surprises there. Woodland Hills. Whoops. Well. All right, so looking at the radar again, since I'm in there, just taking a look. Again, looks like there might be a little bit of weakening of part of this line, but we're still getting reports of really strong winds. So the leading edge is now kind of coming through here. It's moved through Malibu now. It's moving through Topanga Canyon now, and it's about to end up on the west side of LA. So Santa Monica, the 405 corridor. If you're on the 405 right now, good luck. Also, if you're on the 10, notice that I spent a long enough time in LA to add the article before the freeway names. But anyway, this is the 405, and this is the 10, and 405 is about to get it all at once, since it's sort of aligned with this frontal band, and the 10 will get it progressively worse from west to east. So I would say that it's past peak commute, at least in LA, but as always, I'm sure there's still traffic on the road, so going to be a rough evening out there on the freeways, among other things. Particularly because these are very high rain rates. This is the kind of rain rate where water just might straight up accumulate on the road surface. So there are still some okay, so there's a little spin up actually right over, looks like right near Topanga right now. So do you see this couplet? That's the kind of thing we look for. It's not super strong, but it's there, and it's an indication of sort of rotation on a much smaller scale, and You never know whether that could either drop an extra strong wind gust or a brief tornadic spin up. That's the kind of thing that we've been talking about. That's the first signature I've been seeing. In fact, it actually just got a little bit stronger in the last update. So again, this is now east of Topanga. So that's the couplet, and the couplet being, again, if you're red-green colorblind, this is almost impossible to tell, but there's wind going in one direction here in the bright red blob, and wind going in the, pause it for a second, in the opposite direction here. So over just a few miles, there's a complete reversal in the winds, and it's localized enough that it suggests that there's a little chunk of the storm that's rotating in this area. So that's the signature that you might expect. That is actually now. All right, let's see. This is a decent rotational signature. So you have the net rotations. In this direction, the winds are about 25 miles an hour. In this direction, they're also about 25 miles an hour. So that's a net 50 mile an hour circulation. So it's not, if this were the Midwest, people would laugh, but it's there. And that's what we look for when we're looking for localized spin-ups. And so it's already, as I've been talking about it, weakened. You can kind of see how it kind of spun up a little bit and then became a lot weaker. So they're updating the radar quite frequently. It looks like every 2 minutes. This is the fastest I've ever seen them update the radar. So they're cycling through this quite fast. All right, I'll take a quick look at the comments. Another personal reflection. Large parts of Mendocino County, Fort Bragg, or I guess Mendocino, probably town proper, Fort Bragg corridor, just restored power yesterday. Question from John: how much lightning are these storms generating? Not a tremendous amount. There's actually not that many cloud-to-ground strikes showing up that I can see, but there might be some in-cloud strikes. Those do not show up on this platform, so that's possible. These are thunderstorm-like features, even if they're not quite tall enough to produce lightning. So for all intents and purposes, these are thunderstorms without the lightning. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but it means that there's a organized line of cumulonimbus clouds, which are ordinarily thunderclouds. It may just be that there's not quite enough charge separation in the clouds to really get the lightning going in this case. Another comment, driving home via presumably 116 to 101 due to flooding, and there were still lights out and power poles down the side of the road. Power came on in Manchester Monday night, but Gualala only came on today. So this is up north, by the way. I think a lot of folks are talking about what's going on in Mendocino still. Let me see if I can find any other quick little updates about what's happened with this line of storms coming into LA now. Let's see if anybody is reporting anything new with those little couplet. Hey, apparently Weather Channel broke into their coverage for severe storm coverage in LA. How often does that happen? Not very, I'll say that much. Yeah, so you can really see the leading edge of this wind shift. So you see this is about to move into Santa Clarita in the north end of the valley. And so you can kind of see where this is if I sort of draw the line where it is in the most recent frame. You see where on the right panel where the red and the red and the green, once again, if you're not colorblind, you can see where the red and the green intersect, and that's sort of where this line of stronger winds is. So it's actually probably raining before the winds arrive, and then this big burst of winds arrive before the heaviest rain. All right, I'll zoom out a little bit, see what's going on offshore, if there's anything wild. Of course, it's always a little bit harder to see since the radar attenuates. So that couplet that moved through Topanga is still sort of doing something east of Topanga. If it's doing anything interesting, it's about to go over the 405. I think that's just north of the. Okay, so that's going to be just south of. I think this is 101. I believe this is 101, and then this is the 405. So I think this is. Whatever's going on here is about to cross 405 just south of 101. Make for an even more nightmarish traffic situation. I'll use the inspector tool, see what's going on here. I mean, the wind speeds aren't too crazy on the reflectivity, but again, it's a little bit of a rotational couplet, so you never know what it could spin up. All right, let's see. Go back to the questions here. Question: are the warm waters off the coast fueling the storms? Depends what we mean by storms. But if we're talking about the unusual amount of thunderstorm activity and convective storms that we've been seeing associated with these broader storms in California this season, I think yes, that's a reasonable hypothesis. I don't think there's 100% certainty about that, but I think it's certainly plausible. It likely adds some additional moisture to the lower levels of the atmosphere. It probably adds a little bit extra surface space instability. And it just pushes us over the edge into an environment where that is more conducive to thunderstorms or intense things like this. Lauren mentions it came through Montecito really fast, a dramatic 15 minutes or so. Comment: the power just came back on in Butte County above Paradise a few hours ago. Another report from Dustin that the power is still out north of Bodega Bay along the Sonoma County coast since Sunday around 3 p.m. So my overall impression of this line is that it's a little bit less extreme or impressive than it was an hour or so ago, but there is, again, still a severe thunderstorm warning in effect overlapping a flash flood warning. So I think the biggest risk with this line is likely to be, at this point, the residual flash flood and debris flow risk in places that are already highly saturated. However, again, there are a few instances of weak rotation still, or something, a weak tornado or something like that could briefly spin up, but nothing as clearly tornadic as that little spin up we had earlier today along the central coast. Maybe I can switch to the Santa Ana radar, see if that's giving us. This is actually starting to become a better radar for this, so let's see if this gives us a different answer in terms of who's rotating and who's not. So once again, you can kind of just see this is just a classic squall line. You can literally see the squall structure of this. This is literally these bowed sections in the converging winds. Still possible that something sort of pops up along this axis, right where there's that convergence. But right now, just a lot of rain over LA again. The only good news is that this stuff isn't going to last many, many hours into tomorrow. This is going to kind of sweep on through and then be out of there over the next hour or so. So I'll go back to LA radar because I guess that's actually still the better one here. I keep clicking the warning itself, which is not what I'm intending to do here. I say, still a slight chance of something popping up in this area as these lines converge. So I'm kind of waiting for a couple more scans to see if anything interesting happens there before perhaps bidding goodbye again. This is just one of those years where every system seems like it's doing its work and then some. I guess that wasn't really true back in October and November, but then again, as I mentioned, January onward is a different beast when it comes to El Nino years, and in general, the atmospheric background state is just more favorable for things to really escalate if conditions are otherwise favorable, because there is a stronger and more southerly jet stream to begin with starting in January and going through about March. So sometimes in November and December you can get that southerly jet stream if you're lucky, but a lot of years we don't, and so sometimes we think of December as peak rainy season, peak winter, but in Central and Southern California it usually isn't. Usually we gotta wait through January until January or February, and that's certainly what we've seen this year. Yeah, seeing some imagery from Calabasas, and sort of looks like a tropical storm squall. So pretty much what you'd expect from all of this. And I wouldn't be tremendously surprised now if the Weather Service let this warning, the severe thunderstorm warning, at least expire soon, since I'm not seeing this line doesn't look quite as intense as it was before. Then again, it's also possible the radar beam isn't quite seeing things. And they're actually, if you look up here, here's another little interesting feature. You see how this line is moving, a distinct line is moving like this, but then all of these echoes are moving like this to the north. So there's almost a 90-degree angle in here. That's classic wind shear, and that is one of the reasons why you can start to spin up brief tornadoes or water spouts, is because you get that sense of rotation when you have that kind of shear. That's part of what can cause these updrafts to briefly start to rotate. It's not enough to cause them to rotate sustainedly for like big tornadoes like you get in Tornado Alley, but it's enough to potentially spin up small ones. It's also just interesting in its own right, since you can almost view this as a mini cold front, and let me redraw that. You can almost view this as a mini cold front and a mini warm front, just essentially over the city of LA, at a very micro scale. This would be the colder air, and this would be the warmer air, and it's being advected northward, and the cold air is coming down from behind, and it almost looks like there's a little bit of a low pressure system, a meso low, somewhere like that. And that's partly what's going on here. And there's this other bowed echo down here, and it is an interesting, it's a pretty interesting picture, and not something we see too often. So this is not a gigantic, Pacific scale low pressure system. This is essentially a system that is it's not much bigger than the county of LA itself. So it's a whole different scale than the stuff we were seeing earlier in the week. I'll give it one more little update cycle and see what happens, and then perhaps call it an evening again. I hesitate to say maybe Murphy's Law says I shouldn't say I won't be back on tonight, because if I say that, then they'll it'll be Sharknado Eve, right? Just to be clear, I'm kidding. But it's been a bit of a week, that's for sure. All right, well, again, not to negate this line, there's still the possibility of strong gusty winds and flash flooding. Really, you can kind of see the most intense part of this line is sort of just about starting to move through the west side. So it's kind of going through Santa Monica right now, about to go through Hollywood. It's already moving through San Fernando proper. Looks like there's actually a little bit of enhancement of the northern part of the squall line right up by just south and east of Santa Clarita. This might be producing some significant urban flooding or a debris flow or so in this area. There's an intersection of freeways up there, so that might be a mess at the interchange. But generally, this line is going to continue east. It is entirely possible, by the way, that the central and southern part of this line strengthens again as it continues to move east, and there could be more intense showers and thunderstorms again moving into Orange County and San Diego County later this evening. And we still can't rule out the possibility of additional waterspouts or tornadic spinouts, even though right at this moment I don't really see anything too suspicious on the radar. That could still spin back up down to the south and east of where we currently are. So I'll do one last check and see if there's anything else that can be gleaned in terms of reports. But generally speaking, I'll try and limit it to Twitter updates, I think, for the rest of the evening, unless, as I say, unless something even more dramatic happens. And there is at least a slight possibility of something. But I think that once this line moves through, and you can see that since we've been on this live YouTube session, the back end has moved through Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks. So rain is rapidly tapering off, the wind is dying down, and it's pretty much over now. So it's in this narrow swath. It's all moving east. This does extend southward well offshore, so this will make it down to San Diego. And these lines sometimes do tend to re-spin up as they get closer to Orange County, San Diego. For whatever reason, it may be the change of the angle of the coastline relative to the wind flow, but occasionally, as we saw earlier this week with the tornado warning and the possible tornado in San Diego just yesterday, these lines do sometimes tend to spin up a little bit more once the angle of the coast changes. So it is possible that could happen again further to the south and east later this evening. Doing my last check to see if there's anything, and I think I don't have a great deal more to add right now. So before I start droning on, I think I'm going to call it for the evening. So again, I'll try. I'm hoping to have a few days break in these live sessions, that the weather gives us that break. And then next week, I'll be back to talk about what looks like another very active pattern beginning again later next week. So once this is out of the way, drier, warmer weekend to come, but then it's potentially off to the races again in about a week to 10 days. So stay safe out there. Don't drive into flooded roadways, and see you next time.